Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody!
The energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, reppin' both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire misunderstood. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline greens, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. Rob hype on the mic, CP's the fire spark. Together they ignite. Voices like the park fans drift in jerseys. Legacy bold, the Metropolitan story forever told. Turnstile spinning, the crowd floods the gates. This is family, no time for debates. Crack of the Batman, the roar never fades. Queens in the blood, it's how champions are made. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline gleams, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. 7-line swagger, vibes electric and wild. Mets legacy golden since I was a child. Orange crushed skies, let the battle ignite. Ride for the home team till the last fight.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the amazing Mets pregame show right here on the channel and on X, live in living color as the Mets are on a winning streak, Met fans. 3 in a row for our Amazons, and it is time to continue that win streak tonight with Kodai Senga on the mound against Brad Lord. And the Mets did put a beat down on the Washington Nationals in the nation's capital in D.C. as we had great pitching, clutch hitting, and everybody did their job. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And listen, guys, this is what we expected from the New York Mets offense. Now, it took a while for certain guys like Mark Vientos to pick it up. And nice to see him hitting for power, because that's all we really care about when it comes to Mark Vientos, right? Not a third baseman, and that's okay, right? You can be beneficial. You can be impactful by being a DH. Everybody has a role. Everybody needs to have a role on this team and play a role on this team, especially when they put themselves in a hole in the division and, you know, hanging on for dear life as the third wild card in the National League right now. And it's okay. It is okay where the Mets put themselves, because it is what it is. We can't change the past, right? We have 36 games to go, and we need to worry about the next 36 games in a row. That is what the Mets need to worry about. And listen, if Mark Vientos continues to show his power that he lacked for the majority of the season, great, right? Brett Baty also has been Mr. Consistent. You know, what did he have? 15 home runs this year, 14, 15 home runs this year. He's probably on track to hit 20 this year. Just think, if I would have told you Brett Baty had 20 home runs this year and is probably going to end the season with more home runs than Mark Vientos, you would have slapped me in the face, and I probably would deserve it if I would have said that in the beginning of the season. Even I wasn't that crazy to think that. But we can have a 20 home run guy in Brett Baty who only has 200. They said it yesterday on the broadcast. He has 15 home runs, right? If I'm not mistaken, that's how many he hit, right? Let's see. I think it's 15 home runs. Give me 1 second. Let me just double check. I think 14 home runs on the season. He's on pace for about 19, 20, right? He's had 234 at-bats. Just think of that. 234 at-bats and 14 home runs. And this is without him getting a lot of playing time, where he got sent down to the minors and stopped getting playing time. Even when he came back up, Acuna was still getting playing time. Mauricio was back. Vientos was still on this team. Baty wasn't getting any opportunities. And Baty has hit 14 home runs, and he's looked good, and he's played really good defense. And that's okay. And that's the other thing, right? You deserve to play when you earn it. Brett Baty has earned it. He earned the third base job because of his defense, and with a little bit of consistency with his bat, he deserves the third base job over Ronnie Mauricio. There's no conversation about Mark Vientos at third base. There isn't none. Sorry to say for Mark Vientos fans, he's not a third baseman. You know what? On a bad team, he'll be a third baseman. But we don't have time to have him figure out third base. We have better options defensively. And that's, again, that is okay. Right? This is not a detriment to Mark Vientos. He can be very beneficial as the DH. And as I said, the only way he remains the DH over Starling Marte is if he hits the ball over the wall. Well, the last 2 games, he's done that. And they're opposite. They're huge home runs. They're big boy home runs. And that is nice to see from Mark Vientos because that's all. He made his mark because of his power, not because of his defense, even though it was serviceable last year, right? There was more. If you look at the metrics, it wasn't very good, but it was serviceable. But when you hit 27 home runs, nobody gives a shit about your defense. So he's not going to hit 27 home runs this year, right? There's no way. Like, a miracle has to happen for him to hit 27 home runs. But that doesn't mean that he can't be an impactful bat down the stretch over the last 36 games of the season. And he needs to be that. Let's be honest. Losing Alvarez and the way Alvarez was hitting, looking like that he was starting to get his mojo back, his power back, the way he was hitting, you need Mark Vientos to step up. There is nobody else that can step up on this team right now that can provide the power that Mark Vientos can. So if he doesn't do that, we're going to have to go back to Starling Marte as the DH with the lack of power, but he's been clutch as hell and he's been batting over 350. But it doesn't have to come to that. Mark Vientos can fit very well on this team as the DH while Brett Beatty handles third base. There's nothing wrong with that. Ronnie Mauricio will get his starts every now and then, but again, he has not been consistent, so I don't want him to play. Like, I don't care if he's a top prospect. Like, David Stearns screwed up the roster construction that leads for top prospects to sit on the bench. That is David Stearns' fault. That's not Carlos Mendoza's fault. Carlos Mendoza needs to play the hot hand. You look at the lineup, it's been basically the same lineup for the last 2 games. The one in the Little League Classic against the Mariners and last night. It's basically a very similar lineup. A couple of changes where Mullins is batting 8th and Torrens is batting 9th, which is fine. But overall, it's been better. And you see how fast nobody talked about Luis Torrens last night, even though he hit a couple of balls hard. He had a double in one of his last at-bats of the game. And nobody was really talking about Luis Torrens. You know why? Because Lindor did the job. Soto did the job. McNeil did the job. Vientos did the job. Beatty did the job. Didn't I just say yesterday on the pregame, if you're 1 through 7, as it currently situated, does their job, nobody's going to care about Luis Torrens. Nobody's going to care about the 8 and 9 hitters. And to have Cedric Mullins your 8th hitter, it could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse, right? It could be the Jarry Youngs of the world. It could be the Vogelbacks of the world. It could be a lot of guys, the DJ Stewarts of the world, right? It could be the Tyrone Taylors of the world starting, or Jose Siri, who is going to be taking some minor league games in soon, who could be a very interesting option on the bench going forward, considering the fact that I know how much David Stearns likes Jose Siri. He was going to be our starting center fielder, and I thought that was going to happen. But again, injuries happen. Tyrone Taylor had the job, and when they got Mullins, he was basically benched, which is fine. Tyrone Taylor was a 4th outfielder. No problem with that. So all the comments, a lot of the comments were about Luis Torrens. You can't have him here. His offense needs to be taken care of. His offense needs to be better, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't. We know what he is. Listen, if Luis Torrens was a better hitter, he would be starting on another team. The Mets would have never had the opportunity to get him from the Yankees for $100,000. So we know what we were getting, right? All we need from him, and as I said before, right, show competent at-bats. At the very least, make the pitcher work. But his job is to turn over the lineup and make the pitcher work. That's what he needs to do. He'll have opportunities where he needs to come through with runners in scoring position, and that's fine. That's going to happen. That's baseball. But if you're relying on Luis Torrens to score those runs, then your top boys are not doing the job. Luis Torrens should be an afterthought. If we're talking about his offense, we have bigger problems with the lineup than we're letting on. And there's no problem. There is no problem with that at all. Luis Torrens will be fine behind the plate. He has a cannon. There's nothing to worry about here. And it was basically a prime example of what the Mets have done over the last 10 games when it comes to runs. They've been averaging just around a little over 6 runs per game. That was where we all thought they should be the entire year, between 5.5 and 6.5 runs per game. If they do that, they shouldn't have problems losing games. They shouldn't have a problem winning games. It should be not a cakewalk, but it should be a very good chance of winning games. And again, if you get a start like David Peterson, and you're not going to get that from a lot of other guys. You got a lot of 5-inning pitchers here. Like, it's unfortunate, but that's what it is. But you see the difference within the last 5 starts from the Mets rotation. 5 innings, 5 1/3, 5 2/3, 5 1/3. And yesterday was 8 innings. Right? You can live on a pitch from guys in your rotation going between 5 and 6 innings, somewhere in between that, when you got at least one guy going deeper into games, at the very least. You can't have guys go 3-4 innings and hope that one guy goes 7 or 8 innings to help your bullpen. These last 5 starts have helped the bullpen so much that you're going to see bullpen arms be better because they're not overused, right? You don't got to use Helsley 3 times in a row, right? That guy's not set up for that type of pitching. Rogers got a rubber arm, but even him with his soft, when he doesn't throw hard, he gets a lot of soft contact. He makes mistakes with that 84 or 5 miles an hour fastball. It's not really gonna, he's gonna get beat up. So you don't want him to be exhausted going into games. You just don't. Same thing goes for Stanek, who is perfect in these mop-up situations, right? He spills the bullpen, which is fine, right? He has a role on his team. We talk about roles. Everybody has a role. From the first man to the 26th man has a role on his team. And you know what? Stanek's one of the back end of the roster type of roles right now. That's okay. But you know what? I tell you right now, Ryan Stanek is going to be a big part of this postseason for the New York Mets. I'm telling you this right now. Those guys are a dime a dozen. These guys step up in the postseason, right? I don't know what Tyler Rogers is going to do, right? He has a somewhat a good amount of postseason experience, right? Ryan Helsley, not a ton. The Cardinals haven't been good for a while. They made a play a couple times, but again, not a lot. Diaz hasn't had a lot of postseason experience before until he got to the Mets, and that's not a lot. So we're working with a lot of guys here that doesn't have a lot of postseason experience in the bullpen. I mean, let's just look at the rotation. Clay Holmes has a ton of experience with the Yankees as a reliever/closer, but not as a starter. Sean Manaea, the A's haven't done nothing for years while he was on that team, even though he was good. His postseason experience was basically last year. The majority of his games in his career in postseason was last year. Severino, he was a Yankee, but they made the postseason almost every year when he was there, but a lot of the times he was hurt. And he didn't have great postseason numbers. He's not on this team. Just keep on going. Kodai Senga has 1 game? 3 innings in total with the Mets in the postseason? Not a lot of postseason experience, right? And if one of these kids like McLean or Sproat or Bolt are going to be a part of this rotation, we already know they don't have no postseason experience. So there is a lot of question marks. That is why experience matters. That is why I always had confidence in this lineup. Just go back for months. What did I say about this lineup? This lineup is going to show up when it matters. I know they were very disappointing for the majority of the year, but the guys that step up, like Lindor, like Soto, like Nimmo, like Alonso, the guys who've been doing what they have to do in the postseason. You have a World Series champion in Juan Soto. You got Cedric Mullins, who actually was one of the guys that were one of the best guys with Baltimore while they were trying to build things. He was the guy that was dealing with all the losing and finally got a taste of it last year, even though the Orioles didn't do good, right? There, McNeil, same thing. Like McNeil has been decent in the postseason. We know about Vientos and what he did in the postseason last year. Like this is what I've always said about this lineup. I felt that the lineup wasn't my biggest concern because again, right? Look around the league. If I gave the stats between the Mets and the Phillies about 2 weeks ago, when everybody was like, "Oh, the Phillies are so much better offensively," it's one guy. It's Kyle Schwarber. That's the difference. Like Kyle Schwarber is nearly Aaron Judge to the Yankees. Like that's how close it is. And not saying that Harper isn't a damn good player, and Stott and all Realmuto still got that little bit of that that swag, that good player type of mentality. We know about Castellanos and all those other guys, but it's been Schwarber. They've struggled. I mean, they've beat up on the Mariners. I think the Mets kind of like wiped out the Mariners like confidence, to be honest with you, because the Phillies just beat them 11-2. Like they kicked their ass. But the fact is, like everything except for runs scored, if I'm not mistaken, was the runners in scoring position. The average was a 30-point difference. That was it. Home runs was very similar. Triples, doubles. They had more singles. And that was mostly like they had very similar amounts of doubles. And this was about a week and a half ago. So this is when the Mets were still around 4 or 5 games back. They were right around the same number in doubles, triples, almost every stat, walks, strikeout, everything. The only difference was singles. The Phillies had about 40 more singles overall throughout the season. And if you look at the numbers, if you break it down, and they had a good stat, I forgot where I looked at it, but they had a good stat where their average is a 30-point difference than the Mets. Most of that was because of the singles. And when did those happen? It were runners in scoring position. And you see the Mets doing that now, right? I always had confidence in this lineup, right? I don't know what we're going to get from this rotation because there's not a lot of experience or a lot of, evidence to say that they're going to be good. We don't know what Clay Holmes is going to do for another month. Is Sean Manaea going to come back and pitch close to what he did last year? There were some good signs, but not enough. He did give up 4 runs his last start. He gave you 5 in the third, but nothing special. Kodai Senga today. This is a huge start for Kodai Senga. Again, an extra day off yet again. Can you give me 6 innings? Like, there should be no discussion that Kodai Senga can't go 5 innings. At the very least, he needs to go 5 innings. But I want 6 innings. I told you how disappointed I've been in Kodai Senga. I'm not a Kodai Senga fan. I think he needs everything to go right and perfect before a start, and the Mets have to align everything up perfectly for him to get on the mound. It annoys me because you'll see that in the postseason when he's not available when you need him the most. And that's going to be a problem. And I'm going to tell you that right now. Like, we're going to heavily rely on Peterson and Manaea because Kodai Senga is pitching once in a series. I'm telling you that right now. So for everybody who wants to, praise Kodai Senga, go right ahead. He's going to pitch once in every series that the Mets get to, if they get that far. Especially in the 7-game series. You're going to see him pitch once. I'm telling you that right now because he needs 6 days off. He needs 5 days off in the 6th day. How are you doing that in a 7-game series? You could, but there's no guarantee of that. And if it doesn't align with that series because he pitched earlier in a series before, then he might start game 2 and possibly not even game 7. Like that is the things we talk about when it comes to this. Oh yeah, Bobo. Actually, listen, I was never on the loser bandwagon, right? I've said like they went through a stretch. And it was mostly because of the pitching. It was. Like, the pitching was that bad since June. They haven't been good at all. They haven't even given a slimmer of hope. And some of that was injury. Some of that was just lack of performances. And the offense was not terrible. But if you looked from June until probably late July, the offense ticked up in runs per game. They were around 3.5, and they got to around 4.5. So they were scoring more runs, not a ton of runs, but they were scoring more runs. But again, over this stretch of games, about 25 games, the Mets had a tremendous amount of leads in these games. No matter what inning that is, they gave their pitchers leads, and they continuously lost those leads. And it only became more apparent where the media caught on, and now fans started to catch on over the last 15 games prior to them going on this 3-game winning streak, where the Mets were having 6-0 leads, 5-1 leads, 3-2 leads, 3-1 leads, 3-3, tie games, and they were blowing all these games. That is where everybody just didn't care and blame the offense. Let's blame this guy. Let's blame that guy. When we know offense in general, again, can you find me an offense that has been consistent all year? Because even the Brewers, prior to July, weren't a very good offensive team. They've been hot for 2 months. July, mid-June into August now. For 2 months. They played great baseball. Now their offense looks really good. But check their April, May, and part of June stats. It wasn't very good. The Cubs are running away with that division. The Cubs were the offensive juggernaut. Now they're back down to earth. There is not one team that's been consistently good all season with the offense, even the Phillies. So we act like we're the only team that doesn't do well offensively and have these slumps and these long stretches. Look around the league. It's the same nonsense. The Mets and the Yankees were going head-to-head as one of the worst records since June. Their offense was not good. Their pitching was not good. It's all around the league. It's just that we're going to focus on our team and act like we're the only ones doing bad and having bad stats and bad offensive stats, bad pitching, blah, blah, blah. Because if the Phillies were so good, this division shouldn't be a conversation. That is how underwhelming the Phillies have been. It's just that the Mets have been so bad that the Phillies got this lead. It wasn't because the Phillies dominated. Like I've said that for a while. The Phillies have not dominated all year. When you lose 14 out of 16, all the Phillies had to do was play 500 baseball and they gained 5 games. I gave you the stat about a week ago. The Phillies were 5-5 in their last 10, and the Mets were 1-9. That is the 5-game difference right there. Of where now it's 6-game league because the Phillies just won, but it's right there where if the Mets played 500 baseball over 10 to 20 games, they would be basically a game, maybe tied or even a game out. That's the difference. And Baba, yeah, you are what your record says you are, absolutely. But again, the way the Mets have played, the Phillies should be up 12, 13 games easily. But they haven't played that good. And even with that, if you look at the wild card standings, the Mets are only, 4.5 games? 4 games from the first wild card? And we're only 6 games from the Phillies. So a 10-day stretch of games, the last 10 games that we're going to play, the next 10 games, could change the standings in a heartbeat. You can catch the Phillies. You can be close to the Phillies. You can catch the Cubs, who have not played well. The Padres came back down to earth and got punched in the face by the Dodgers. Remember everybody talking about the Padres running away with the West? What happened there? They went into LA and they got embarrassed by the Dodgers. The Phillies, who played the Mariners right after the Mets played them, the Mets, took them to town when the Mariners were red hot, and the Mets basically broke the Mariners and they got swept against the Phillies. So it comes back to the same thing. If the Mets play above average baseball, they don't even need to play great. If they play above average, and I'm talking about like out of 10, the next 10 games go 6-4, 7-3, which is not a crazy number. You go 6-4, I said this before, you will gain games on the Phillies. They have not played well. They've been beaten up on a broken Mariners team. The same Mariners team that always chokes this time of year. The same thing goes for the Padres. Same thing every year. It's like clockwork with the Padres and with the Mariners. Every year they make the best deals at the deadline. They're the ones that make them, the better moves. And every year around this time, they always start to choke. Padres have the lead. Now they don't. Now they go ahead of the Dodgers and then they get their ass kicked. The Mariners, same thing. They fought all the way back for 2 months to get ahead of the Astros. And then what happens? They find themselves back down. Like, this is what they do. And That's all around baseball. This has been a trend. The Yankees had a 7.5 game lead on the Blue Jays. They're a second place team. They're a first wild card team, but again, a week ago, and again, this is a 10-game stretch. A week ago, they were a half a game ahead in the third wild card. So that's why I said, don't worry about game 25 left of the season. Worry about the next 10 games. The next 10 games are with the Nationals and the Braves. And if I'm not mistaken, it was another team that I forgot, but I do believe it's the Phillies. Excuse me. Yeah, it's the Nationals, Braves, and Phillies. Worry about those next 10 games. That's all you have to worry about, because if you start looking way ahead, that's when you get into trouble. And that is where the Mets need to worry about today. And again, they need to, as bad as the Nationals are, the Mets should sweep. But again, I'm not going to be overly crazy about sweeping. Take series. 36 games to go. Can you take the majority of the series? If you take the majority of the series, you're around 91, 92 wins. Like, that's it. It's not that big of a deal. Like, you can really do that. Like, 90 wins should get you into the postseason. And again, if you really look at it, if 36 wins, 36 games left, let's just do the math really quick. If the Mets win, let's say they go 26-10. So 26 plus 67 is 93 wins. Right? That's a good number. But let's just say, let's go a little bit less, right? Let's go 20. Let's say they go 20-16, and it's 4 games over 500. Right? So it's like, it's 87 wins. Now, 87 might be pushing it, but I think if you can get between 89 and 92 wins, I think you're going to be safe in the postseason. Because again, I don't trust a team like the Padres. I don't trust, like the Reds have played well. And sorry, that's something. What the hell just hit my head? Sorry about that. But that's the way I think that we have to look at it. We can't keep on looking at it as, oh my God, look what they're doing. Because what they do, again, if the Mets take care of business, they're going to be in the postseason. A team is chasing us, right? There's one team chasing us, the Reds. Now, we faced the Reds in September. Actually, you know what? I think we faced them the end. Let me see. I think it's the end of the month. Yeah, we faced them in September, the 5th, 6th, and 7th in Cincinnati. That's a huge series. And unfortunately, the Mets have a tough road trip starting September with Detroit, Cincinnati, and Philly. It's a 10-game stretch. So, and that's the last time we faced Philly around that time too. So we know Detroit is fighting for the best record, and Cincinnati is obviously going to be fighting with the Mets. But again, we got 15 games. Well, I'm a liar. Yeah, we got 15 games until that Cincinnati series. They can be buried by then. We can bury them by then. But it's up to the Mets. Because, Cincinnati, let me just double check about Cincinnati's, let's see. With Cincinnati's schedule, I don't know what it looks like, but I think they have a tough schedule. If I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check. I believe they do. So they're finishing up against the Angels. Then they go to Arizona. Then they got the Dodgers. Then they got St. Louis, Toronto, the Mets, Padres, Athletics, Cardinals, Cubs, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee. So Milwaukee might have the division in hand. Probably, well, they're going to have the division in hand, but they probably have the best record, most likely, in the National League by that time. But they don't have an easy schedule. Like they got the Dodgers, who are still fighting with the Padres for the division. They face Arizona, who's kind of out of it but been playing well. St. Louis is not good. Toronto is obviously fighting, trying to stay in that division. They play the Mets and they play the Padres. Like, those are huge games. And when Cincinnati plays the Padres, if the Mets do their job, you want Cincinnati to beat the Padres. Because if they beat the Padres, that means the Mets are doing their job and winning, and you can catch the Padres. That's where we are right now. Because if the season ended today, we would face the Phillies in a wild card matchup. The Phillies would be the 3rd seed, Mets would be the 6th seed, and we'd be playing in Philly for 3. And then we're in the bracket with the Dodgers. So it would be the Cubs and the Padres and the Brewers waiting for the NLDS. And the Dodgers waiting for the Mets-Phillies series. So the Mets would be in the same bracket as they were last year, except they faced the Phillies in a wild card instead of the Brewers. So it would be Phillies wild card, Dodgers, and LDS. So that's where we are right now. And yeah, the Mets do have one of the hardest schedules in Major League Baseball. But again, the Mets are one of the better teams. Like we act like the Mets aren't top 5 in baseball or top 5 in the National League. They are. Top 6, they are. So they're one of the best teams. Like, just because they haven't played well doesn't mean that, the record doesn't matter. The record does matter. As bad as the Mets have played, they still maintained a playoff spot for the entire time. They were one of the worst teams in baseball since the middle of June. Since early June. They've held that lead in the division, in a playoff spot. Yeah, they were. 19-36. It was one of the worst records, along with the Yankees and the Nationals. But yet, the Yankees never lost their playoff spot, and the Mets never lost their playoff spot. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't still lose it for the Mets, obviously, but they were playing so bad. Like, they were playing worst team in baseball bad, and they still kept a playoff spot throughout all that. Now, that 4 or 5 game lead we had on the wild card from the last team that was not in the wild card, it shrunk. But even with that, even the Reds didn't play extremely hot baseball. They were playing, again, slightly above average. That's the thing. Like, people don't realize that other teams that the Mets, like the Phillies, the Cubs, the Reds, those teams were playing slightly above. The Padres, slightly above average. Because if you look at, just go by the 10-game intervals, when you always see the standings, look at the last 10 games. You'll see a lot of 5-5, 6-4. You know how many times the Mets had 1-9, 2-8 over the month and a half of games? It was often. And again, slightly above average, 500 baseball. The Mets would be rolling away in that third wild card. They would be easily comfortable in that third wild card. But they didn't play average baseball. They played well below average baseball. Again, if they would have played average, we would have been talking about this wild card being a challenge. And Chad, you don't have to buy into this team. I don't have any problem with somebody doing that. But the main goal of this team, or the outlook of this team going into the season, was the offense was going to carry this team. They're doing that now. Yes, they're getting better pitching, but when you score 6 runs or a little over 6 runs per game, your pitching doesn't have to be great, even though it's been pretty good over the last 5 games. When you score 6 runs per game, you have a really good chance to win. And we forget that the Mets were scoring runs over this month, even into late July. They were scoring runs. The pitching was giving it up. And now that the pitching looking like it's finding its footing, and again, I'm not the biggest fan of this rotation. Everybody knows that. But these guys aren't bad pitchers. Now, I have my problems with how good some people might think they are, but they're not bad pitchers. Clay Holmes has become an analytical pitcher that baseball loves, is a 5-inning pitcher. That's what Clay Holmes is. But that doesn't matter. If he throws 5 innings for the remainder of the year, it's more on Kodai Senga and David Peterson and Sean Manaea. Those guys need to go 5+ every single time. Because then the Clay Holmes 5 innings won't matter. Nolan McLean needs to be a guy that gives 5-6 innings, and I think he could do that. Brandon Sproat, who's going to be up here in his next start, most likely, he just threw 6 innings yesterday. I think he threw 7 innings yesterday or the day before. He's a guy that can go 6-7 innings. There's no problem with that. Now, I think they're going to limit their innings. I don't think they're going to try to push him to the point where, let him get to 100 pitches, which I would be upset about, but I understand their logic. So I'm not worried about that. Like, do I have full confidence in this team? No. But as I've always said, I have confidence in this offense. And if we saw anything in the postseason last year, what drove teams to victory? It was their offense. Every series in the playoffs last year, it was all about the offense. It was all about the offense. It wasn't great pitching. Like the great pitching was in Detroit, was with the Phillies, was with the Padres. All of them were knocked out early. Right? The Guardians, who had good pitching, didn't matter. Didn't matter. The Royals, same thing. Everybody talked about their pitching. Didn't matter. It ended up being the offenses that did their jobs. And we all forget that the Mets kind of lacked their offense when they got to the NLCS. They had two big games, and that was it. They were even scoring 8 runs or no runs. Like that's not the way to go. So, and again, the playoffs can surprise everybody, right? It could be the pitching that wins this year, right? Everybody knows how good Detroit's pitching is, but does that mean they're automatically winning? No, we know that. They can get picked off by a hot team, wherever that may be. So I'm not concerned where I think that the Mets can't beat anybody. They can beat anybody in the National League. They can beat anybody in the American League. It's just a matter of, if I truly believe this, if the Mets offense does what they're supposed to do and they play to the back of their baseball cards, they're going to be very hard to beat. Look at the lineup today, 1 through 7. Just the 1 through 7. That's not an easy lineup to get through if you're a pitcher. And even if you want to go through 8 and have Cedric Mullins, who, let's be honest, there's a lot of teams that would take the 8th hitter being Mullins. If you can go 1 through 7 and see a lineup like this, and obviously they got to perform, but this is not an easy lineup to get through. It's not. And I talked about the Phillies lineup. They're vulnerable. For years, they have been vulnerable. It's been the Kyle Schwarber show. Like, that's what it's been. If you control Kyle Schwarber, when Kyle Schwarber goes 0 for 4 in a game and you keep him, give him an 0 for, look at the games the Phillies lose. It's when Schwarber doesn't do damage. Now, he's done a lot of damage this year, but that's been a fact. And that same thing goes for Lindor, by the way. When Lindor doesn't hit or he's going through his slump, the Mets slump. No matter who's slumping. Pete Alonso's slumping. He hasn't been great over the last 6-7 games. He hasn't been great at all. But Lindor has been red hot, and the Mets have been winning. Like, there's nobody on this team that impacts the Mets winning than Francisco Lindor. I don't know why that is, right? I can't explain it, but we all see it. When Lindor started to go MVP caliber last year, who took off? The New York Mets, the best record in baseball. April and May, yes, the pitching was a big deal, but Lindor got off to a hot start the first month and a half. Then he got hot. He got cold for basically 2 months, from June and July. And the Mets were one of the worst teams in baseball during that stretch. Now, we can talk about the pitching. We can talk about Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, anybody you want. But when Lindor goes, the Mets go. But, Mike, no, we don't. That's the thing. Like, why are we worrying about Cedric Mullins? I talked about this since the day the trade deadline was going on. Cedric Mullins is not going to be a difference maker, but he's better than Tyrone Taylor, and he's a solid professional. That's it. Play really good defense, and he'll give you the occasional hit. He'll give you the occasional home run. When he gets on base, he'll steal bases. Stop worrying about Cedric Mullins, because if you're going to talk about Cedric Mullins as the guy we need to provide offense, then somebody's not doing their job at the top of the lineup. That's it. Same thing goes, like, everybody was complaining about Luis Torrens and his offense. Why are we worried about his offense? Like, of course, they're going to come up with runners in scoring position at times. It's baseball. We all know that. But if your top 4 guys, let's just put the top 7 guys right now, because those guys are your main guys right now, considering the way they've been playing. If your top 7 guys don't do the job, of course you're going to talk about Cedric Mullins going 0 for 4 and not doing what we need him to do. But if you're going to worry, but Alvarez wasn't that good. Like, Do we realize the Mets had the best record last year with Alvarez doing absolutely nothing, minus Juan Soto, minus Brett Beatty? Shit, even minus a bad year from Alonso and bad year from Jeff McNeil? We're getting a better year from Alonso, better year from McNeil, better year from Beatty. And we have Juan Soto that has 30 and 20. Like, we're worrying about the wrong things here. Cedric Mullins and Luis Torrens shouldn't be the conversation about the lineup. If you're going to talk about them, that means other guys in the lineup are not doing their job. But Mike, have you watched the games over the last 7 days? 5 through 9 has been pretty good. 5 through 7 has been pretty good. Again, find me a team that has a good 8 and 9 hitter. I guarantee you won't find one better than Cedric Mullins with his 240 average, 15 home runs, and his 15, 16 stolen bases. I'm sorry. We can't be worrying about the Cedric Mullins and Luis Torrens offense. If you are, then we have worse problems than those two guys. Because I said it yesterday, and I'll keep on saying it. Look at the lineup 1 through 7. Everybody's been playing better. No, Mike, no. That's wrong. No, the conversation is because you need a better bat. Find me a better bat 8 and 9 around the league. Find me one. Cedric Mullins is a solid professional. He isn't great. He isn't a game changer. But he's batting 8th in this lineup, sometimes 9th. It's not a topic of conversation. You want it to be a topic of conversation because you want to focus on that while your other guys are doing the job. Lindor is doing the job. Soto is doing the job. Nimmo has been fine. Pete Alonso has been struggling a little bit over the last couple of weeks, about a week, but he's been okay. Jeff McNeil has been hot. Vientos is starting to show some power. Beatty has been consistent. Why are we talking about that? Well, Mike, I agree with that. But Vientos is now playing like that. So the topic of conversation isn't 5 through 7. It's 8 and 9. But that shouldn't be a conversation about offense. You know what Cedric Mullins needs to do? You know how he's going to benefit this team more? Playing great defense in center field. Same thing goes for Luis Torrens. If Vientos picks it up, he replaces the Alvarez production. It's just that simple. They don't need more power. You got Vientos. You got Beatty, who has 14 home runs. You got McNeil that has what, 12? Alonso has 29 with 30. Nimmo just hit 20. Lindor is at what, 29, 30? Soto's at 31. There's more than enough power. Like, stop worrying about power. There's more than enough power on this team. More than enough. The Mets will never had 430 home run guys, and there's a strong possibility that's going to happen. I just gave it to you. McNeil has been one of the best hitters on this team since he's come back. Marte, who is not in the lineup because Vientos has been hitting, has been the hottest hitter in the Mets lineup. Lindor is red hot. I just talked to you about Mark Vientos. Look at Brett Beatty. Brett Beatty has been consistent, right? Brett Beatty's not a world beater, but he has 14 home runs. We didn't get that from second base last year. And again, I'm putting Brett Beatty in a situation as a utility guy because he played a lot of second base this year. We didn't have 14 home runs from second base last year. We had no power in center field. We got a 15 home run guy in Cedric Mullins who will hit those home runs. He's going to hit 20 home runs. So you should be expecting 5 to 6 more home runs over the course of the next 36 games. But you're focusing in on the wrong thing. This lineup has been scoring 6.5 runs per game for the last 10 games. And if you even go back further than that, yeah, well, Mike, I understand that. But look what he's doing now. You can't change the past. The same reason why you can't change the past with a Brett Beatty. What are they doing now? Vientos hasn't looked this good all year. That's a good sign. And again, do I trust it? I don't know yet. I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not very confident in Vientos. I finally, you know what? Here's what I've been saying all year about Mark Vientos. Has he had problems adjusting on breaking balls and off speed pitches. He could not hit that outside pitch that he was taking to right field last year. That Sunday game in the Little League Classic, he finally took that pitch with power over the right field wall. He's been swinging and missing on that pitch or rolling over on it and hitting a ground ball. And those breaking balls have been fooling him. He's been taking those pitches because he's confused by them. And he hasn't been hitting the fastball because he's so worried about breaking ball and off-speed pitches. But he hit that hanger yesterday and obliterated that ball. So those are good signs. But I'm not taking 2 games and giving him a trophy. I'm not. But it's a good sign. Because with Alvarez, and again, I think people are overreacting of how good Alvarez was. It wasn't that good. It's just that it was so bad what Alvarez gave us and what Luis Torrens hasn't given us that Alvarez looks better than the overall aspect of what he's doing. It was fine, but people act like Mike Piazza showed up. Like, it was just so bad that any resemblance of offense was better. So it's just that simple. Like, that's it. And Vientos needs to, I said this before, I don't care about Vientos is average. I don't care that he doesn't play third base anymore. I never thought he should be a third baseman. But if he provides the power, we'll be fine. Nobody's gonna worry about it. That's all he needs to do. He needs to hit the ball over the wall. The last 2 games was great signs, not because he just hit it over the wall. It was because he finally took that pitch on the outside corner that he's been missing. He took it over the right field wall against the Mariners on Sunday. Yesterday, that breaking ball that has been giving him problems, even hangers that he's just been fouling back and missing, he connected. That is a good sign. And again, they don't call him Swaggy V because he looks cool. They call him Swaggy V because the confidence that he showed last year at the plate. He was not going to get beaten at the plate. There's a little bit of somewhat a resemblance of a sign from Mark Vientos, which is good. But he also has to do it. Yeah, I understand. I understand that, committee. I get that. But it still didn't feel like Alvarez felt like he would have one good at-bat a game. It felt like. Even though he got a single here, a single there, and he had a little bit of home run. I give you that. I just didn't feel it was as good as everybody was making it out to be. Like, I felt like the numbers were a little bit skewed, in my opinion. Like, I hate just talking about numbers. You watch him every day. He was still taking bad at-bats. And it was better because it was better than what he was doing before. And it was better than who was replacing him in Luis Torrens. So that's the problem. We look at it from what was happening prior to when he was starting to do better. And it was so bad that anything that looks like offense, we get excited about, not just about the stats. Like, how many people are bitching about Juan Soto this year? He has 31 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and he's almost going to have 100 walks. And people act like he's having the worst season ever. It's the stupidest thing. So, and fandom, I mean, if you're going to be a troll Yankee fan, like, relax. You beat the Cardinals. You beat the Rays. Okay? Like, and your friend is probably a Phillies fan. That's okay. Whatever. Who cares? Right? And if Phantom wants to be honest, and he wasn't here before probably listening, I don't think the Phillies are that good. If the Phillies were that good, they should have a 10-12 game lead right now, as bad as the Mets have played. Because they've had a lot of 5-5 last 10 games and a couple of 4-6s over that time. And you control all you want. I tell you, I come back at you. I tell you that. Because you guys only show up when your team is actually doing well. But you were nowhere to be found when the Phillies were getting embarrassed by the Mets in the playoffs. So, hey, it is what it is, right? This is your last hurrah for the Phillies, right? You're getting older. Schwarber ain't going to be a Philly after this year. And God knows where you're going to get your offense from without Schwarber, because you've ran on Schwarber. And that's fine, right? The Mets run on Lindor. But you see what happens when the Mets control Schwarber in the postseason. Nobody else steps up. And that was a fact. What, he had 2 solo home runs in that series, and it mounted to nothing. So the good news is that there's 36 games to go. The Phillies just swept the Mariners, and the Phillies should be thanking the Mets because we broke the Mariners. Well, Fran, you can talk about the Fighting Phils all you want, but the Fighting Phils lost the World Series, lost the NLCS, and lost the NLDS the last 3 seasons. There's only one thing left: getting your ass beat in the wild card, and then we're going to be talking about no playoffs for the next couple of years. So that's going to be fun, right? When Dombrowski is going to get fired for every year since the World Series, you've been getting closer and closer to not making the World Series. So that's going to be fun. And again, the Phillies lead into the division. I have nothing to say. The Mets haven't deserved the division right now. But guess what happens? The New York Mets and the Phillies play 7 more times. That's probably going to determine the division. Well, Franum, it's not the past will determine, and I'm not saying it will, but it's kind of the track record, right? Facts are facts. You went to the World Series, NLCS, NLDS, and right now, no matter you win the division or not, you're still playing a wild card series, and it would be against the Mets if the season ended today. So I believe the game just started. If the rain didn't stop everything, let's see. All right, so the game's on. All right, guys, so with that said, enjoy the game. There will be no post game today, so enjoy the game. Let's go Mets. And we can stay pace with the Philadelphia Phillies, as I said earlier, and remain in the wild card. With that said, have a good night, guys. Let's go Mets. And let's get a victory, guys. Let's get 4 in a row. Have a good night.
Seven train rumble, headed to the field. Orange and blue vibes, the energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, repping both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire misunderstood. Hear 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city sand lights to the skyline greens, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the crazy.